A U.S. Navy aircraft carrier was once forced off course, not by an enemy, not by a storm, but by a whale. That is a real event, documented, verified. And it is just one chapter in a story most people have never heard. A story about the world's most powerful warships sharing the ocean with creatures that answer to no admiral, no government, and no flag. Some of those encounters were fascinating. Some were deadly. And at least one of them changed the way the entire U.S. military trains its sailors forever. The ocean covers over 70% of this planet. And every time a carrier strike group sails beyond the horizon, 5,000 sailors, dozens of aircraft, enough firepower to end a conflict, they are entering a world that belongs to something else entirely. What happens when those two worlds collide? That is exactly what we are going to cover today. Drop a comment right now and tell us, did you ever think wildlife could be a real challenge for a modern aircraft carrier? Type "no way" or "I knew it" below. We want to hear from you. Now here is something that sets the stage. Carrier strike groups spend months at sea, crossing the Pacific, holding in the Red Sea, patrolling the Indian Ocean. Every single day they are out there, they are sharing the water with creatures that have no idea what a carrier strike group is. That combination, steel versus nature, has produced some of the most jaw-dropping moments in modern naval history. And the U.S. Navy has learned hard lessons from every one of them. Let us start with the encounter that caused real confusion in the middle of actual combat. Whales, the enemy that was not there. It was 1982. Britain was at war with Argentina over the Falkland Islands. The British fleet, including ships protecting their aircraft carriers, was sailing through the South Atlantic using sonar to track Argentine submarines. Here is the problem. On sonar, a whale looks almost identical to a submarine. Same size, same depth, same movement profile. With tensions at their peak, torpedoes were fired at the contacts. The first two contacts were whales, both killed. A helicopter was scrambled for a third contact. That whale was killed too. And then, one of the warships physically collided with a whale, punched a hole in its own hull, and had to return to port for repairs. A living creature took a British warship out of action during a war. The U.S. Navy watched all of that and took very serious notes. Because here is what the Navy understands that most people do not. Aircraft carriers during flight operations have to constantly adjust speed to create the right wind conditions over the flight deck. At certain moments, those speed adjustments create genuine whale strike windows, dangerous not only for the whale but potentially for the ship. So here is what changed. Every ship in a U.S. carrier strike group now carries trained lookouts posted around the clock, specifically trained to spot marine mammals so the ship can adjust course in time. Federal law under the Marine Mammal Protection Act requires the Navy to maintain what is called a safe speed, meaning the vessel must be able to stop or turn before striking any animal it spots. The Navy also coordinates directly with the National Marine Fisheries Service to map out high-density whale areas across different seasons. Blue whale feeding grounds off San Diego restricted during critical months. North Atlantic right whale migration corridors, the Navy actively routes training exercises away from them. All of that planning happens before a carrier leaves port. Sonar, when the Navy's own tool becomes the threat. But here is where the story takes a turn that most people find genuinely surprising. The biggest wildlife threat around a carrier strike group is not a physical collision. It is sound. Military sonar is extraordinarily powerful. It is the Navy's eyes beneath the water, capable of detecting a submarine from dozens of miles away. But that same energy, traveling through the ocean, has been shown to cause serious harm to certain whale species. Scientists at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, working with Navy funding, discovered that beaked whales appear to suffer something similar to decompression sickness when exposed to intense sonar pulses. The sound may mimic the acoustic signature of killer whales, causing the beaked whales to panic and ascend from deep dives too quickly. Nitrogen bubbles form in their tissues. The result can be fatal. The clearest proof came in the year 2000 in the Bahamas. U.S. Navy destroyers ran routine sonar training. Within 36 hours, 17 marine mammals had stranded on nearby beaches, including 14 beaked whales, several with bleeding around their ears. The Navy investigated and ultimately acknowledged the link. That event changed the rules. Today, the Navy funds millions of dollars in marine mammal research annually. Hydrophone arrays on the ocean floor acoustically track whale populations in real time during exercises. If a whale is detected within a defined safety radius, the sonar shuts down immediately. The Navy's own published position states, "We go to great lengths to avoid harming marine mammals during training and testing activities at sea." Those are not just words. They are legally binding commitments enforced by federal regulators. Before we go further, if you are not subscribed yet, please take 1 second to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Over 98% of viewers watch without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a massive difference to us. Now what comes next is the most shocking chapter in U.S. Navy history. Sharks, history's deadliest wildlife disaster at sea. July 30th, 1945. The war in the Pacific was nearly over. The USS Indianapolis had just delivered the components of the atomic bomb that would end World War II. Just after midnight on the return voyage, 2 Japanese torpedoes struck the ship. The USS Indianapolis sank in 12 minutes. Around 900 men entered the water alive. What followed over the next 4 days is, by every historical account, the single deadliest mass shark attack in human history. Hundreds of oceanic white-tip sharks were drawn to the site by the explosions, the blood, and the movement of hundreds of struggling men. They attacked the dead first, then the wounded, then the living. Survivors described how the strikes came without warning, a flash from below, a scream, then silence. Men banded together in groups, kicking and punching at anything that approached. Those on the edges were the most exposed. Anyone bleeding had almost no chance. 4 days passed before a patrol aircraft spotted the survivors. By then, only 316 men of the original crew of 1,196 were still alive. Historians estimate between a few dozen and 150 deaths were directly caused by sharks. It remains the greatest single loss of life in U.S. Navy history. Here is a question for you, and we genuinely want your answer in the comments. Do you think modern U.S. Navy sailors receive specific training for shark encounters? Yes or no? Drop it below right now. The answer is yes. And the training is tougher than most people expect. U.S. Navy SEAL candidates undergo a night swim off San Clemente Island near Los Angeles, one of the most active great white shark breeding grounds on the Pacific coast. Before anyone enters the water, instructors walk through every shark species they might encounter. Swimming patterns, feeding behavior, attack style, and the one principle that gives a person the best chance of surviving a real encounter: face the animal and hold your ground. Sharks are ambush predators. They attack what they believe is unaware. The moment you turn and face them directly, the dynamic changes. As for repellents, the Navy has been trying to solve this since 1943. They developed a compound of black dye, decomposing shark flesh, and ammonium acetate packed into a sailor's flotation vest. Despite years of testing, there is no recorded evidence it ever worked in a real encounter. No effective repellent has been widely adopted by any military to this day. In this one specific area, the ocean still wins. The cookie-cutter shark, the smallest threat with the biggest bite. Now here is something that will completely catch you off guard. Not all dangerous encounters involve massive creatures. One of the most damaging and persistent wildlife threats to the U.S. Navy comes from a shark that is just 18 inches long. The cookie-cutter shark earned its name from exactly what it does. It locks onto a target, any target, regardless of size, and removes a perfectly clean circular plug of flesh or material. It has been found feeding on tuna, blue whales, and U.S. Navy submarines. For years, submarines were returning from patrols with mysterious circular gouges in their exterior rubber sonar domes and acoustic coatings. The Navy investigated. The culprit was eventually identified as cookie-cutter sharks, attracted by faint warmth from the hull, biting through the soft rubber components used to reduce acoustic signatures. The fix? The Navy quietly replaced those sections with hard fiberglass housings. An 18-inch shark forced a design change across one of the most advanced submarine fleets on the planet. That fact belongs in the record books. Dolphins and sea lions, from wildlife to military asset. Here is the twist in the entire story. Not every wildlife encounter ends in a standoff. Since the early 1960s, the U.S. Navy has been running one of the most remarkable animal programs in military history. The U.S. Navy Marine Mammal Program, based in San Diego, California, trains bottlenose dolphins and California sea lions to perform underwater missions that human divers and modern robots simply cannot match. The reason is straightforward. Millions of years of evolution gave these animals detection abilities that no technology has yet replicated. A trained dolphin using its natural echolocation can locate an underwater mine faster, more accurately, and in worse visibility conditions than any sonar device the Navy has ever built. The program started in 1960 when Navy researchers acquired a dolphin to study the hydrodynamics of its body, originally to improve torpedo design. What they found changed everything. These animals were not just fast swimmers. They were deeply intelligent, highly trainable, and capable of operating in open ocean without any tether, cage, or restraint. The program operates what are called MK teams. MK4, 7, and 8 use dolphins for mine detection. MK5 uses sea lions, which have exceptional low-light underwater vision, for equipment recovery. MK6 uses both animals to guard harbors and ships against enemy combat divers. When a dolphin detects an enemy swimmer, it approaches from behind and bumps a device against the diver's air tank. That device releases a buoy, instantly alerting the nearest Navy personnel. Sea lions carry a similar device and physically attach a restraint to the enemy swimmer's limb. Both animals operate faster and quieter than any human response team could. These teams can be deployed anywhere in the world within 72 hours, by ship, aircraft, or helicopter. In 2003, Navy Dolphins were deployed to the port of Qasr in Iraq, clearing underwater mines ahead of U.S. ships entering the harbor. They protected the sailors who followed them in. Each dolphin in the program is paired with a dedicated handler team, and nearly 20 veterinarians are on standby at all times. The Navy's own data shows its dolphins live roughly twice as long as wild dolphins. Its sea lions live up to 3 times longer than their wild counterparts. In 2023, a 57-year-old Navy dolphin named Blue became the subject of a New York Times feature on dolphin aging, a living example of how the U.S. Navy cares for the animals that serve alongside its sailors. Birds, the threat above the waterline. The threats from below get most of the attention, but aircraft carriers face wildlife challenges above deck as well. Any bird that enters a jet engine during flight operations can trigger catastrophic failure. On a carrier deck where jets are launching and recovering in tight cycles, day and night, in all conditions, a single bird strike at the wrong moment does not just damage one aircraft. It can create a chain reaction that endangers the entire flight deck. The Navy's response is built into daily operations. Before any flight operations begin, the deck is swept for foreign objects and any living creature that has landed on the ship. In tropical regions, large seabirds and even land birds exhausted from migrations frequently land on carrier decks. Standard protocol is humane removal before flight ops begin. And here is the historical footnote that puts all of this in perspective. When the USS Langley, America's very first aircraft carrier, was commissioned in 1922, it carried a dedicated pigeon loft on its stern. Homing pigeons were the Navy's primary communication backup. The Navy even created an official enlisted rate for it, Quartermaster Pigeon, nicknamed the Pigeoneer, with candidates training for up to 12 months just to care for those birds. At that moment in history, sailors had more experience launching pigeons from ships than launching aircraft. That single fact tells you everything about how rapidly naval warfare changed and how deeply the relationship between the U.S. military and the natural world runs. One last question for you before we wrap this up. Based on everything you heard today, which wildlife encounter surprised you the most? The whale that took a warship out of action, the tiny shark that redesigned U.S. submarines, or the dolphins actively protecting sailors in a war zone? Drop your answer in the comments. What the ocean teaches the Navy. Pull all of this together and the pattern is clear. Every time the U.S. Navy has faced a serious wildlife challenge, whether it was sonar confusion during combat, shark attacks claiming sailors' lives, a tiny shark punching through a submarine, or birds threatening carrier flight operations, the response was never to simply overpower the problem. It was to study it, adapt to it, and in some cases, build a partnership with the very creature that posed the challenge. That is a quality worth respecting. The same institution that builds nuclear-powered aircraft carriers also funds millions of dollars in marine mammal research. The same sailors who operate the most powerful naval force in history also stand watch specifically to protect whales from being struck by their own ships. The ocean does not care how much steel you put in the water. The U.S. Navy learned that lesson the hard way, across decades and across conflicts. And every sailor who pulls on that uniform today benefits from those lessons. Some written in history books, some written in tragedy, and some written by a dolphin that saved a sailor's life in a war zone. That is not just a military story. That is a story about what it means to truly understand the world you operate in. If this video gave you something to think about, hit that like button now and make sure you are subscribed. Every video on this channel is built on real research and real respect for the men and women who serve. You will not want to miss what we cover next.